Yup, that did in fact say 39 million. Ladies, gentlemen, and haradrim of all ages, when it comes to Druid, the meta is usually considered as consisting of the two main builds. Those builds being Tornado Wolf and the Pulverized build. But what if I told you there was a third one that is arguably stronger than both of those once you have all the right components put together properly? Before we dive into it, I want to highlight the fact that we are working with Mobalytics to create written versions of our build guides, including this build within this video, as well as many other Diablo 4 builds that we've made on the channel. This lets you easily refer to our builds and see all of the information in a smooth way. You can use the app or just in game. Once you have it downloaded, hold tab and Q to open the overlay, which lets you look at any of the builds on the site, including our own ones, without even leaving the game. You can find a link to all of this down in the description and comments down below. As for my statement about the Druid meta, yeah, I hear what you're saying. It's not possible. Nothing is as strong as the main two builds, but, well, it is. I have a good Tornado Wolf build. I have a good Pulverized build. The highest Nightmare dungeon I had ever managed with either of those at my level was in the low 70s, but the highest Nightmare dungeon I've completed now is an 87, mostly just because I'm not level 100 though. I'm getting closer every day, one bit at a time. That said, this shows that this build is easily capable of doing a tier 100 Nightmare dungeon when you are fully leveled up. What is the build then, and what is the concept? I'm going to call it Booming Bulwark, and quite simply, there is one ability that just hasn't gotten as much love as it deserves for the Druid, and that is Earthen Bulwark, specifically due to the innate Earthen Bulwark enhancement. This makes it so when your Earthen Bulwark expires, or more importantly for us, when it is replaced by a fresh one, it will pop out and do a ton of damage to anything nearby. At its base level, the damage from this isn't massive, but put a few ranks into the skill, put some barrier generation on your gear, and the damage gets genuinely silly, hitting for 30 million when I'm only at level 93, and that's on top of the skill itself being a defensive one at its core. It's literally just a giant barrier, so it makes you super tanky on top of dealing the damage that it does. That's the base concept, but of course it gets even sillier, and I do of course have to shout out Ace of Spades from Goblin Inc., who is the first person that I saw came up with this general build idea. Of course I wanted to make my own take on the concept, make some changes that I think improve it that final bit, and share it with all of you because this is just really freaking cool to me, and I think it deserves way more attention than it has so far. So how does it work past that initial concept then? Well, the big thing that you can really do that really drives us to the next level is the stat damage reduction while injured. You can get this on your pants, on your boots, and on amulets. A max roll in the highest bracket of gear breakpoint is 43.5%. This sadly doesn't stack additively though, so if you get 2 max rolls, it doesn't give you 87% damage reduction while injured. The amount gained decreases the higher the stat gets. The stat caps at 85% damage reduction while injured on your stat screen. Anything above that does literally nothing, but to get to 85%, you need to have really high rolls on all 3 of those pieces of gear with this stat. Sadly, even though I've sunk about 50 million gold into rerolls, completely tanking my actual gold count, I don't have 3 max rolled pieces myself, but I have 1 max roll and 2 really solid ones, so my damage reduction while injured is up to 78%. But it's worth noting, those last few percentage points actually make a massive difference too. We then take that idea and work it into a symbiotic aspect Nature's Fury build. Set ourselves to under 35% health before actually doing a difficult dungeon, then you press Earthen Bulwark, which gives you a barrier with the equivalent of your base health, but this shield also takes up to 85% reduced damage because you have the damage reduction while injured stat activated from where your health is under the barrier. If you can get the damage reduction up to its maximum, that is essentially 85% bonus damage reduction you can keep permanently active before even counting every other one of your defensive stats, and defensively, that is of course absolutely nuts. It makes your effective health really wild, even though your actual active health is only 35%. It makes it so you can just sort of waltz through a tier 100 Nightmare dungeon if your gear is correct, and all you have to do is press Earthen Bulwark, basic attack until the cooldown resets thanks to Symbiotic, then press Earthen Bulwark again, and just repeat. All of that said, we'll of course be going over the skill tree itself, the spirit boons that we use for this, the legendaries and uniques used to make it function perfectly, the stats that you want to aim for on your gear to make this function as well as it does, the Paragon board setup of course, which is actually nutty for this, and then finally just how to play and any tips I have for my time with it so far. Without further ado then, it's skill point time. Starting off with the basic skills, we'll be taking 2 because this build uses the Greatstaff of the Crone Crone unique weapon, which makes our claw also cast Storm Strike. This is ideal for proccing our key passive Nature's Fury as often as possible, mostly to force the symbiotic aspect to reset the cooldown of Earthen Bulwark. Sadly, the Storm Strike that is created by casting Claw with this doesn't proc Nature's Fury, it doesn't count towards that, but using this lets us use Claw as our basic skill, which not only gets 10% faster attack speed than any other basic skill from its first enhancement, but also has a 15% chance to attack twice when you hit the button due to Wild Claw. This means that this skill procs Nature's Fury more than any other basic can, and it also counts as a Storm skill due to the unique weapon. On top of that, it means that it applies the properties of Storm Strike, which is a 25% damage reduction for 3 seconds after hitting with it, a 15% chance to immobilize any of the 4 targets hit that this will chain to, and also a 50% vulnerable application chance for 3 seconds on any enemy hit. This is a super reliable source, vulnerable, it hits fast, it procs Nature's Fury, and as a result, it's just near perfect.
Dear God, it's beautiful.
Then in the core skill node cluster, we only take one skill, which is Predatory Instinct. We take all 3 ranks of it for 6% increased crit chance against close enemies. All enemies are close when Earthen Bulwark pops and when our basic skill connects, so this is major for both of those. Then in the defensive skill node cluster, we are of course putting 5 ranks into Earthen Bulwark itself. Also taking the enhancement that gives you the Unstoppable buff while it is active for immunity to crowd control effects just constantly. The goal of this build is 100% uptime on the barrier, which also translates to 100% unstoppable uptime. Then we take Innate Earthen Bulwark, and this ability is where the vast majority of the damage comes from in this build. This gives you the pop of damage when Earthen Bulwark is expiring, and also triggers if you apply a new Earthen Bulwark over an existing one, which is what makes this actually function offensively. The damage calculations for this are incredibly unique. It has nothing to do with the damage on your weapon itself, it depends on the size of the barrier itself, but then also benefits from the barrier generation stat that you can get on gear, which it treats as its own unique damage multiplier. Essentially, that is why this ability does as much damage as it does in the build. It benefits from crit, it benefits from vulnerable, it benefits from your willpower, but it gets a 4th multiplier that no other skill has, which is barrier generation as a separate damage bucket. There is a maximum to the power that this can reach as a defensive stat, though you don't really want bonus ranks of the skill above the maximum. Even though that can happen, you're much better off running with just 5 ranks in the skill tree and then getting more defensive stats on your gear or barrier generation. That said, I obviously do have bonus ranks here, and if I wasn't showing you the skill tree right now and how you should do it, I would take 3 points off of the skill and put them into somewhere like Digidegrade Gate for the movement speed bonus that this gives you. Aside from that, we also grab Debilitating Roar in this cluster. This is basically your emergency button. The way this build works, you should always have a super resistant barrier online, but if for whatever reason you just aren't getting Nature's Fury procs or the cooldown doesn't reset, you can press Debilitating Roar to reduce your damage intake for 4 seconds by 70%, sort of just a safety net in case of particularly poor RNG. It's also worth noting, this doesn't overcap on your damage reductions because this applies to enemies, not to yourself. We also take the first enhancement on this skill for 22% base life fortify when cast, but no further enhancement here. We get 1 rank of Ancestral Fortitude for the passive 5% increase to your non-physical damage reduction, but mostly just as a gateway for 3 ranks of Vigilance for 15% damage reduction for 6 seconds after you use a defensive skill. You will be casting Earthen Bulwark far more frequently than every 6 seconds, so this is just permanently active. Then we take a companion for this build in the next skill node cluster, which is going to be Poison Creeper. This is our main source of applying poison to enemies, which is important for defense, as poison ticks twice per second when it's applied. All of these count as stacks towards the disobedience aspect. As well, there are stats in Paragon nodes that give you damage reduction from poisoned enemies. Then on top of that, it is also great offensively due to some passives in Paragon nodes that we'll go over later too. So poison is really important, put simply, and this is how we do it. But it's even better because if you take the Brutal Poison Creeper enhancement, this also gives you 20% bonus crit chance against anything that is hit by the active component of this skill. After that, we move on to the Wrath skill node cluster, and here we take the Hurricane skill. This puts damage in a radius around you for 8 seconds, but the cooldown often gets reset thanks to the symbiotic aspect, so honestly it's pretty much active permanently. Then we take the first enhancement, which gives you a slow on everything that is within the radius of Hurricane. Then we also take Savage Hurricane, which makes any enemy affected by Hurricane deal 20% less damage, which again is really massive for for our survivability, the main reason that the skill is here. Earthen Bulwark does insane damage, so most everything else on the board is just there for survivability purposes to let you push through to tier 100 nightmare dungeons with this no problem. Then we take a ton of passives in this cluster too. 3 ranks of Crushing Earth for a 15% increase multiplier to Earth skill damage against crowd-controlled enemies. All enemies are slowed thanks to the poison effects that we have going, so this is pretty much just always active. 3 ranks of Stone Guard for a 12% increase multiplier to Earth skill damage when you have more than half of your health as Fortify, which this build does just do consistently. Then 3 ranks of Safeguard, which causes Earth skill critical hits to fortify you for 7% of your base life. Then we also grab 1 rank of the Neurotoxin passive, which slows all enemies that are poisoned, 1 rank of Toxic Claws, which makes it so that any of your werewolf skill crits apply a poison effect. This only really works for Claw in this build, but it still has some effect, so it does of course matter. And then 3 ranks of Envenom for a 30% increased crit damage multiplier against poison targets. This is by far your most important offensive passive, so if you can find an amulet that has our required stats and also ranks of this, then you're just set for life. After that we move on to the ultimate skill node cluster, and here we grab Petrify and its first enhancement as well. Not the second one though, as the second enhancement gives you spirit generation, which is just useless to us. We're not using core skills, we're not spending spirits. With the first enhancement though, Petrify stuns enemies in a large radius around you for 4 seconds and gives you a 30% increased crit damage multiplier against them for the duration, boosted to 7 seconds, and 50% increase against bosses specifically, as it obviously won't stun them. Then we take 3 ranks of Defiance for 12% increased damage against elites with nature magic, 3 ranks of Natural Disaster for 12% increased earth skill damage against vulnerable targets, and 12% increased storm damage against stunned, immobilized, or knocked back enemies. Then we take 3 ranks of Resonance for 6% boost to nature magic skills. This boost is tripled if it is an earth skill that's used after a storm skill, or vice versa. Our main loop in this build is using Claw, which counts as a storm skill, for us to trigger Earthen Bulwark resets, which is an earth skill, so they boost each other for the full 1.18 multiplier just consistently. Then we take 1 rank in Quick Shift, which gives you a 5% increase in damage to skills that shapeshift you, and then 3 ranks in Heightened Senses for a 12% damage reduction from elites for 5 seconds after changing into wolf or bear form. Bulwark puts you in human form, but Claw puts you immediately back in wolf form, so this constantly activates these bonuses. Then finally we have our key passive here, which is of course going to be Nature's Fury, giving earth skills a 30% chance to trigger storm skills of the same category, and storm skills a 30% chance to trigger earth skills of the same category. This got buffed by 50% in the recent patch, which just made this build even stronger somehow, especially as this effect proccing is what triggers our cooldown reductions. With that then, let's move on to our spirit boons here. In the deer path you're going to of course want Wariness for 10% damage reduction from elites. This is in pretty much every build, it's just the best one in this path. Then in the eagle path you actually want swooping attacks for 10% increased attack speed. Faster attacks means more Nature's Fury procs, means more Earthen Bulwarks, pure increase to both damage and survivability as a result. I used to recommend Avian Wrath in builds, but I recently heard that this boon is actually bugged. Even though it states that it is a crit damage multiplier, it is actually only counted as an additive in the game's calculations, which just isn't really worth it, honestly. If you want to go pure damage with this, you could bond with the eagle path here and take Scythe Talons as a second boon for 5% increased crit chance, but it doesn't really improve it that much. Generally instead I'd recommend bonding with the wolf path so that you can take both Pack Leader, which gives you a 20% lucky hit chance on critical hits to reset your companion skill cooldowns, and also Bolster for 10% maximum life as Fortify every time you use a defensive skill, which just helps keep you constantly fortified. Then in the snake path you're going to want to be taking the Calm Before the Storm boon for a 10% lucky hit chance with nature magic skills to lower your ultimate cooldown by 2 seconds. And most builds that you'd see, you'd actually take Masochistic in here for the insane healing that it provides, but obviously this build is actually stronger without any healing if you want to stay at low health, so it's sort of an anti-synergy for this specifically, and thus we avoid it in this case. Then let's talk about our legendaries and our unique, which is of course the Greatstaff of the Crone. I mentioned why this is so good earlier. The only thing to mention in particular here is because the main damage source of this build is Earthen Bulwark, which does not scale off of your weapon damage. That stat is weirdly not your priority on your Crone. Normally it would be, but if you have 2 different Crones to choose from in this build, you always want to take the one that has the higher damage to close and damage to crowd controlled enemy stats, even if the item power is otherwise lower. Past that, on our amulet for 50% boost to effectiveness is of course the symbiotic aspect. This is imperative to have in this slot, and you basically need a maximum roll to make this work, because when you have it, it makes Nature's Fury procs reduce non-ultimate cooldowns of the opposite type by 12 seconds. Essentially, 1 in 3 claw hits will trigger Nature's Fury, that's just how it works, which then triggers this aspect to reduce Earthen Bulwark cooldown by 12 seconds. We then grab the rapid aspect for a 30% increase to basic skill attack speed, which again lets us proc the key passive more often. We also have the Crash Stone aspect for up to 40% increased crit damage multiplier against crowd-controlled enemies with Earth skills. The aspect of Retaliation is also perfectly acceptable in this slot. It just gives you a damage multiplier increase depending on your Fortify, and we fortify a ton in this build as well. Then finally, for our offensive aspects, we have the aspect of Natural Balance for a 45% increased crit damage multiplier on Earth damage skills used after Storm skills. Again, Claw into Earthen Bulwark is always a thing, so that just happens. Storm skills that are used after Earth skills also gain 12% crit chance, which is just nice in general. Then on our boots, we have the Ghost Walker aspect for up to 25% increased movement speed and the ability to walk through enemies when you have the Unstoppable buff. This build has 100% uptime on Earthen Bulwark, and so this is literally always active. Then as far as our defensive aspects go, you of course want Disobedience above all else. It's just insanely strong in content of all types, up to 0.5% total armor increase per stack, which stacks up to a 50% increase at maximum stacks. We also grab the aspect of Might. We are using basic attacks just constantly, and so this is just a 20% damage reduction active consistently as a result. Then finally, this is sort of a secret sauce for this, the aspect of Mending Stone. This increases the duration of Earthen Bulwark by 6 seconds and replenishes some of the barrier amount when you get a kill, but the extended duration just gives you a bit of a longer window to proc the cooldown reduction if you need it. The whole concept of this is to always have your barrier up because you want to play at low health, so it's actually just deadly to lose your barrier. This helps make sure that this happens even if you get bad RNG for a few seconds, because the Bulwark will last longer than the 3 seconds that it does by default. With all of the aspects covered then, let's talk about the gear itself. There are 2 stats that you absolutely need to get this build properly rolling. The first and most important is damage reduction while injured. This can roll on amulets, pants, and boots, and you need at least a mid-roll in this in each slot to make this even worth using in the first place, with nearly maximum rolls in every slot required to hit the 85% reduction cap. Then you also need cooldown reduction both on your helmet and your amulet as well, not necessarily max rolls of either of these, but at least good rolls, as the goal is to get the Earthen Bulwark cooldown as close to 12 seconds as you physically can, as this is the amount that gets reset by Symbiotic Aspect and thus allows you to just spam this out as fast as I am in the dungeon footage. Past that, you want lots of crit chance on your gloves and your rings as well. You want barrier generation on your helmets and your rings too. You want attack speed and basic skill attack speed wherever you can get them. They are top tier for forcing more procs. Outside of that, offensively, you of course want crit damage as much as you can, vulnerable damage as well. Damage to close enemies is also really good, that type of just sort of standard stuff. Defensively, you want at least 1 roll of armor percent while in werewolf form, which can even come on your boots. You're in werewolf form 90% of the time, so this applies a lot, and the roll range on this is simply a higher range than the standard total armor percent increase. You want damage reduction from close enemies, damage reduction from poisoned enemies, damage reduction while fortified, honestly anything that affects our general situations, and a couple bits of bonus maximum life isn't bad to have either. Your main actual source of effective health is your barrier, so maximum life is not a focus at all, but it doesn't necessarily hurt to have just as a backup in case the barrier drops at a certain point. With that then, let's have a look at our Paragon board, very nearly the same one that Ace of Spades uses just because it's pretty much picture perfect. I've literally moved like 1 point just to activate 1 extra glyph bonus. Take the left path on the starting board to grab all the beautiful armor increased nodes that are over here and head up to the first socket, in which you want to slot in the Territorial glyph for bonus damage against close enemies based on how much dexterity you purchase in the radius, as well as bonus damage reduction from close enemies as a secondary effect. Grab just enough dexterity in the radius to actually activate this effect, then climb up the left side through the damage increase rare node to get to the board attachment gate itself and stick on the heightened malice board with the legendary node itself in the bottom left corner. You want to go immediately left, sticking to the upper path to reach the legendary node first, and this one gives you 45% damage increase as a multiplier when there are 3 or more poisoned enemies near you. We have Poison Creeper, and Claw crits also apply poison too, so this is active just pretty much always. Then you want to head up from the starting point again, going through this rare node here that gives you poison resistance and armor. Obviously we care a lot more about the armor itself, and then head up directly to the glyph socket over here. Inside of this you want to slot in the Shapeshifter glyph. This boosts all rare nodes in the radius, as well as the secondary effect of giving skills that shapeshift you a 20% chance to crit separate from your normal stats. This stacks on top of your crit chance, and Earthen Bulwark will always shapeshift you out to human form, so this is just a ton of crit chance on our big damage move. Collect the nearby rare nodes, and then as well as enough dexterity to activate the secondary effect, then head to the upper board connection gate and stick on the inner beast board itself with the glyph socket on the bottom side. Head directly there to said glyph socket through the right side path, and then slot in the exploit glyph for bonus vulnerable damage based on the amount of dexterity that's purchased in the radius, as well as a secondary effect that applies vulnerable to enemies for 3 seconds the first time that you hit them on a 20-second internal cooldown. The beauty of this is that the vulnerable bonuses from this are applied for the hit that activates vulnerable too. So if you walk into a group and pop an Earthen Bulwark as the first bit of damage they take from you, it will still get these bonuses. Get just enough dexterity in the area to actually activate the glyph, as well as the defensive rare node on the right side. Then you want to progress right and up through the tenacity rare node for a bonus maximum life, and also a bunch of more bonus armor. We love armor, we want more armor, and then you want to keep progressing up so you can get to the havoc node. This will give you 30% critical strike damage and 10% physical damage. Then you want to grab the magic nodes that are beside it, not all of them, but most of them. After that is where this gets really funky. Head back to the heightened malice board and get to the right side board attachment gate over here, and here you want to attach the Thunderstruck board with the legendary node in the top right corner and the glyph socket in the bottom left, because we're ignoring the legendary node itself. Of course, we don't really care about storm skills. At the start, you want to go right 1 and then straight down to this rare node that gives you damage reduction from vulnerable enemies, which is nice. Everything will be vulnerable most often. And then you want to move to the glyph socket itself, in which you will put the protector glyph. This gives you a bonus to rare nodes in the radius and a secondary effect of 10% damage reduction while you have a barrier. You do need to get this to level 15 before it will activate on this board. Mine is not quite there yet, so know that this build still has room to grow even from my own footage. Then you want to head up and to the right so that you can get to the Deluge rare node for bonus critical strike damage and bonus crowd controlled enemy damage too. Then we're done with this board, just completely. So go back up to the inner beast board and exit out of the right side here. You may be wondering why we do it in this order. It's a little bit weird, right? But that's because each subsequent board that you add on has higher requirements for the rare nodes on the board that use the doubling bonus to their effect. So we do this so that we can activate as many double bonuses as possible. At this attachment gate, you want to stick on the Survival Instincts board with the legendary power on the left side. Then honestly, you can just sort of leave it for now, but by the end, you'll want to crawl down just far enough so that you can activate some of these damage reduction while fortified nodes. They're just nice to have. It's also more fortified generation. It's a good thing to have on your side. After that, you want to go back towards the glyph socket on the inner beast board, and you want to progress to the left through the upper path to grab the nimble rare node for more attack speed. Again, attack speed equals proc, so this is really good for us. Grab the magic nodes that are around it for even more attack speed, and then you want to exit out the left side board attachment gate. On here, you want to attach the Earthen Devastation board with the glyph socket in the bottom right corner of it. Head to the glyph socket directly like so, and then slot in the werewolf glyph here for bonus damage while in werewolf form based on the willpower purchased in the radius, as well as bonus damage reduction while in werewolf form as well. Pick up just enough willpower to activate the glyph like this, then head out the left side grabbing the rare node for 15% increased critical strike damage with earth skills and also a bit of willpower, then wrap down to this rare node in the bottom left for a bunch of bonus armor as well as some potion healing, but obviously we don't care about that, we're just here for the armor. After that, you want to wrap up to get to the legendary node itself on this board, which gives earth skills a 30% increased damage multiplier against crowd controlled enemies. After that, you want to head straight down from this magic node to get to the board attachment gate, where you'll be attaching our final board for the day. Lust for Carnage. You'll want to rotate it so that the glyph socket is on the left side like so, then you want to path directly down to the glyph socket itself and stick in the Undaunted glyph. This gives you bonus damage while fortified based on the amount of intelligence purchased in the area, and has the secondary bonus effect of 10% damage reduction while fortified as well. Your remaining points here should be just enough to grab the intelligence to activate the final bonus effect, and that's it. Every point spent, a bunch of glyphs all upgraded so their bonus effects will actually go, and that's just beautiful, isn't it? And that covers how this build is made, all of the things that you need and how to do them, but what about how you actually play it? Well, quite simply, in lower level nightmare dungeons or equal level content, you can just play at full health until you naturally go down to 35%, but for higher level ones, you absolutely want to force yourself to low health before going in. This is so things don't one-shot you for maximum health before you can activate your injured damage reduction bonuses, so just find a mob outside and let it hit you until you reach just under 35% health. If you die in the dungeon or accidentally panic heal, you will need to reset this, and one way to make that a bit easier that I'd recommend is to put the Skinwalker aspect on just a random piece of gear and carry it around with you. That way, if you accidentally let yourself get damaged too much, you can just stick this on, basic attack in the air, and heal a little bit, even it out so that you are as close to 35% as possible without going over the threshold. Aside from that, you want Earthen Bulwark active before engaging any dangerous enemies. Basic attack to reset the cooldown, then once you know for sure that you have that ready to go, you can pop Poison Creeper and Hurricane for their damage and defensive bonuses too, then pop Earthen Bulwark on an enemy's face for huge damage. Just keep basic attacking, popping your Creeper and Hurricane when they reset, but focusing mainly again on Earthen Bulwark above all else. This is the main thing you need active. Debilitating Screaming Roar is your panic button. Use this if you're engaging a particularly difficult enemy, or you can just save it around just in case something goes wrong and your barrier drops before you can cast Earthen Bulwark again. This is basically your get out of jail free card, break in case of emergency type of skill for this build. Other than that, we have Petrify. Save it for larger group of monsters, for elites, or for bosses. It'll have the largest effect in those situations. Outside of that, just spam Earthen Bulwark and basic attacks to reset it. Simple as that. This one is absolutely exhilarating to play in my opinion. Honestly, I love using this, and it just has such high potential while being far more consistent than either Tornado Wolf or Pulverized Bear, which both rely on lucky hit procs to actually function. Whereas this essentially just sort of does what it does. It has one part with a 30% activation chance, but we hit fast enough that that is basically a guarantee when we need it, and the damage that it outputs as a constant is nasty. No real hills and valleys types of things, it just is strong all the time consistently, offensively and defensively. It truly is just awesome as a build. That's it then everyone, the booming Bulwark Druid build, my take on a low health barrier build for Druid, and easily the third meta build that this class has for super high-end endgame content, which is more than any other class, so we should be really happy about that. Possibly, it might even be the strongest of the 3 builds for Druid when all is said and done, honestly. This is slower for speed clearing purposes at lower levels, but that simply isn't the goal of the build. This is a pushing build. It's meant for doing hard stuff, and oh man, push it sure as hell does. I hope you've enjoyed this build guide, and I hope you have as much fun as I do if you manage to put it together yourself. Remember, you might have to be a bit patient. Getting the right amulet is the real deal breaker for this build, and it took me almost a week of farming and rerolls to get there myself, or you guys would have seen this build even sooner than this. Let me know in the comments what other kinds of Druid builds that you'd like to see next. I've got some stuff in the mix, but I always like to see what stuff you guys are interested in as well, so I can shift the order I'm working on things. Like if you like the video, subscribe and hit the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.